Hello and welcome back to Big Bad Books, the podcast where read them, we do,
we read
so
them.
read them, you needn't. I'm Isaac.
Well
and
improvised.
Joining me as ever, it's Declan.
That's me.
So sorry this one's a day late, everyone. I was trapped in the reading realm. Just looking around.
I came home, I'd been out, I was all ready and raring to record,
Yeah.
by which I mean a little bit drunk, a little bit sad,
that's the
and
way.
having only just found some content
It's the
at
Shame
11
City
o'clock
way.
at night. And Isaac's door, it was just sort of threateningly ajar, and there was red light pouring out
Oh,
from
was
it.
there?
And I was
didn't see that, of course.
I was like, what the fuck is going on in here? It's very Lynchian.
Yeah.
And Lynchian it became, because I stepped in, and there he was sort of like mumbling, eyes wide open, racing back and forth across the text on his Kindle.
Yeah.
And I tried desperately to stir him, but he could not be stirred. Stirreth, he did not.
And what I was doing in there was researching and getting to really know the characters, because we've had some feedback of the show so far, most of it very positive, but there have been some naysayers saying,
Go on.
You're not giving Ready Player 2 the respect it deserves. Put some respect on the name of Ernest Cline. And to those people, I do say, no, we won't.
Read a better book.
But no, of course, everything's going swimmingly. We're back with another chapter for today. It's chapter 5 or chapter 0003, depending on whether you can count, or you're Ernest Cline. And for those who are new, this would be a wild place to start. I'd go back to episode 1 if I were you.
Personally.
But
Maybe you're built different.
every week, every other week, in fact, we are reading another chapter of Ready Player 2 until we're done with the whole goddamn book. And I'm pleased to say that, although it says that there's 14 hours left in the book because of me flicking back and forth, we are coming up to a quarter of the way through.
Oh, that is good news. That is great.
No estimates as of yet as to how long we'll be sticking with it, or by which I mean how long this will last in terms of fortnights. But we'll see this through, won't we? When have we ever not?
If you say so, buddy.
We sure will. We've already got great ideas about books upcoming, including Atlas Shrugged. Declan's going to read everything Hillary Clinton ever wrote.
I'm not going to do either
It's gonna
of
be
those
huge.
things. You can't make
We
me.
found some terrible conservative literature. I saw that one today. Elephants Are Not Birds.
Yes.
A kind of
anti-trans.
Crazy as well, because the elephant bird is a famous historical bird.
Yep.
So of all the two animals you could have picked.
And if you remember Dumbo, he could fly.
Yeah,
So there's precedent.
check,
There
fucking
is
mate.
precedent.
But suffice it to say that the Big Bad Book's future, as it's present, looks pretty
If anything,
bright.
books are only getting bigger and badder.
Can't be
The
stopped.
world is our oyster.
That's entropy. Let's dive right in. And today's theme.
I think you're forgetting something.
Oh, go on.
We need to do a recap. What
Oh,
in the name
fuck.
of God?
Good
What in the name
question.
of God happened last time?
Good question.
You may be wondering.
I am.
Well, yeah, well, don't you worry. So am I.
Great.
The difficulty is that last week, you may remember, the chapter's big theme was aimlessness,
Yeah.
because there was nothing and yet everything happening. As far as I recall, there was just lots of different plots and none of them were going anywhere. There was a big rocket in the sky that was filled with embryos. We didn't really know why. He's going to disappear maybe. He's got lots of police bots. He's got lots of bots hanging around him.
Yeah.
He's taken a break from the mead feed. He won't,
He's a
he won't get on
super
that.
chat. You've kind of skimmed over that.
Yeah, well, that was lacking last time. That was lacking because he's not getting any. He's not getting any.
He doesn't need to. He's Sigma, as we've established.
He's not. But anyway, also the new things that were coming in were he's got a big spider. He's got a big robot spider. And the robot spider, he sleeps in the spider when he
Yes.
goes on the internet.
A spider tank.
And the spider, ready to scuttle away,
Yeah.
firing its guns as spiders do, if and when he
Yeah.
needs to. He's also been
That's his
on a
immersion
sort of
vault.
serial killer spree where he was just killing off all his haters on the web.
Oh, yeah, I
and then
forgot about that.
they released a song and it went to #1 and he killed them.
He literally did explode their careers.
He exploded their careers,
With
he
his
killed their avatars,
powerful
and
money.
he deleted their song off the internet.
Yeah.
But there was nothing he could do about the 50-person orgy that was at the top of the feeds. There was nothing he could do about that.
You've got to know
Nor
when
all
you
of the
can-
Artemis down
Yeah.
blouse upskirt content.
You've got to know when to fight those battles, I guess.
So it ended. Yeah, well, we don't really know what the fuck is going on. No mention of the shard riddle so far.
I'll just remind you how it ended. It ended with he logged back into his motive, which I believe is the name of the
That's the big spider.
mobile tactical immersion vault. I think
Something
that
like
might
that.
be exactly it,
Yeah.
in which case I'm so pleased. He logged in, and to complete the kind of access process, he spoke the passphrase, being careful to enunciate each syllable. Really interesting detail to mention, I guess.
Yeah, that is good.
And it was a lyric from the 1987 song "Don't Let's Start" by They Might Be Giants. No one in the world ever gets what they want. and that is beautiful. And I'm going to, we don't have a phrase for it yet on the show, but we're going to do like a klaxon. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is going to be the central thesis of this text.
Okay.
That no one gets what they want, and that's beautiful. And that the whole book is going to be about the way in which Ernest's avatar in the fictional world, Wade, is trying to navigate through the contrast between what he wants to exert and what the world will actually
It's
handle.
interesting because it feels like it's quite convenient to be able to say that when you have everything.
Yes, it is
When you
super
have
useful.
everything,
I thought
yeah.
you were saying from my
No,
perspective.
sorry, not from you. I mean
Yeah.
from Wade/Ernest to say,
It
well,
is.
I've got all of the monies.
Yeah.
I've got all of them.
Yeah.
And I've got all of the power and the control. He's got a big red
He's
button
like
that can
Homer
turn off the
Simpson with
whole
the sugar.
internet. Like, he's literally got a self-destruct button for the web. Feels like you probably do have what you want. You're just miserable because you're an incel.
On the flip side, thanks to Wade for taking that journey to the top so that he can report back down
There's no
from Mount
point.
Sinai and say, don't worry about it,
Don't
guys.
worry about it.
It's not worth it.
I'll stay up here by myself.
Even while he's being served by 58 different robotic...
Many of whom are
Gang.
sworn to silence
Yeah.
because he's scared of the voices he's given them.
Chapter 0003/Chapter 5. I materialised inside my stronghold on Falco, the small asteroid in Sector 14 that still served as my avatar's home inside the Oasis. He tried relocating to what's called Castle Anorak, which is where James Halliday's avatar, Anorak the Wizard, used to live. But I didn't really like the decor or the general vibe over there.
You could probably change it.
Yeah, you could. But then you might have had to describe what it originally looked like.
Yeah,
Or-
and
what
then
it now
also
looks
what
like.
it now looks like. No, I'm grateful. Just go back to the last
There
place.
is a staggering lack of describing like anything at the same time as he also describes everything.
Yeah.
It's like it's actually very similar to when you're teaching kids, like young kids, descriptive writing.
Yeah.
And they focus on the most inane, or sometimes not inane, sometimes like the most off the wall stuff that you'd never have thought to describe. And sometimes that's really good, but more often it's really something that you want to change. And
Yeah.
be like, well, no human really relates to the world through the very specific and dull lens of just different technology acronyms that there are. Like, that's not really world building to just sort of name things like a motive.
Whoa,
and an only.
hang on. It's not world building.
That's what some naysayers might suggest.
Sorry, I was worried because
I
that's
love
all,
that
that's
stuff.
all we've had so far.
For me, a book is like a catalogue of tomorrow. It's just a list of different text that could be.
I don't have, but oh boy, could I.
It's fun to imagine, isn't it? It's fun to
It is.
imagine.
What was the you start before I rudely interrupted with the recap?
Go on.
You started to talk about what today's big theme was going to
Yeah,
be.
oh goodness.
Because
That was-
I'm assuming the theme is an asteroid.
No, it's not.
Okay, good,
Well, that
good.
was one of the reasons that I had to delve into the reading realm where I was trapped for 18 hours, which that's our time. For there, it was Narnia shit. I aged and died.
You had a whole life and a
I had
wife.
2 wives. My children will never know me. The problem was when I finished this chapter, and to be fair to Ernest, it's kind of a short one. I think
bless
it's
him.
the shortest one so far. Thank you,
Okay.
Ernest. Really pleased about that. I finished it and I thought that chapter is almost as if I hadn't read any of the book for all that I've sort of learnt about the book.
It is interesting because I have felt that way about all the chapters so far.
Yes and no. Yes, thematically and narratively, but no in terms of detail. Because this one doesn't even have that much in the way of like the Argos catalogue of just stuff that Ernest's made up. Like, it doesn't even really have...
What about stuff Ernest's seen?
Again, like, it's light on reference. If we were tracking... I used to do this thing called 750words.com for a very brief period that I was really... I talk about it like it was a major period in my life. But it is cool. I would encourage people to consider it. And then to get bored of it after a month like I did.
Sounds good.
It's, as the name suggests, you write 750 words about what your day was. It just emails you. It's like, just do it. And it's a nice kind of writing exercise. And at the end... it can track different like metrics that you add yourself. So like it encourages you to like put like a song that reflects the day, or like numerical things like happiness or I don't know, depression level, something like that.
Yeah.
And
Either
at
end of
the
the
end,
spectrum there.
you could like graph. So if you'd picked happiness as one of yours, you could like graph, be like, oh, that's interesting. Like it dipped there and it picked up there.
Wow, it kept on going, kept on going
Interesting.
down.
It's plummeting. Crazy. But if we were to draw a graph of Ernest's kind of key metrics and indicators through Ready Player 1 and 2, there's things like tech level, like how much tech is he talking about, reference level. In Ready Player 1 at least, like ham-fisted plotting shit, where it's just like driving you at breakneck speed
Ceaselessly
through war
forwards,
games,
yeah.
being fully played out before your quivering eye. All of those have kind of fallen off in this chapter alone. I would say that so far in the book we've had a lot of references and more tech than was even in Ready Player One, I think.
Yeah,
because really the whole premise of this book is there's more tech and it's better. But
and also there's more of it outside of the like web.
But that's not a huge feature of this chapter. The references are going quite light.
Maybe this is one of those things about how is it people who like have kind of analysed Agatha Christie's and picked up where they reckon she was like developing Alzheimer's or something, just like like there's fewer adjectives as they like go on and all this sorts of shit, and like maybe this means that maybe he's
evolving.
Having a bad time.
But well, maybe it's for the best though.
What?
I'm not saying that I love this chapter.
You're not becoming one of those people who was like, I hate Eminem now that he's clean. He should go back on the drugs.
I think what I'm saying is that maybe Ernest is trying something new, and we shouldn't hold him back from it.
Okay, well let's hear it.
A chapter.
You're saying it was good.
I'm saying that it has some things that the other chapters don't. I won't go so far as to say that quality is one of the things.
Okay.
But it certainly does have, for example, dialogue between more than one character.
Whoa,
Ernest, which is
slow down, Ernie.
There are as many as 4 characters in this chapter.
Hell.
So he basically is popping into the Oasis. I think you can broadly assume that every chapter will either be going into or coming out of the Oasis.
Is it the Oasis or the Oni?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Oh, okay.
The Oasis is where you go.
Oni
the
is just an
how
interface.
there,
Okay,
cool. The whatever Oasis neural interface where you can fuck clouds and be Superman.
Yeah. You can chew food
all that stuff. This had been my avatar's home during the final year of Halliday's contest, and I'd cracked one of its major riddles while sitting in this very chair, he reminisces, in a way that is 5 chapters in, it's still not tiresome for me.
No.
It's got the whole vibe of like someone just reliving the glory days of the book.
Well, it feels like he's just trying to sell more copies of Ready Player One.
It's weird because like Ready Player One was successful by every metric that Ernest probably cares about. He doesn't need to like lord it up and remind us of that, lionize it at every point.
I think my working theory is that this entire thing is like written for the film.
Yeah.
Like this is a book that he's written knowing it will get made into a movie.
Like he's hoping.
We'll
be there.
Got them tightly crossed over here. He's like everything he's doing is to try and make it more filmic already. So he's gone too far. Everything's a flashback.
Yeah, it's
interesting. Then every bit of tech has to be described so that when they get there, they know exactly what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah,
like he's hovering over the director's shoulder already.
It is a very I don't have the vocabulary to describe what I'm going for here, but I'm going to try anyway.
Go for it.
There's something interesting, and maybe there's something we'll come back to because, like I said, this is just occurring to me. The whole book of Ready Player One, the whole Ready Player franchise, is nominally about Easter eggs and pop culture references, and Ready Player 2 has now subsumed Ready Player 1 into a kind of meta
as its own reference.
And it's getting more and more like spiraling down until it will just reach a kind of infinite speck of self-reference where like the book will only be about other parts of the book which were about Ready Player 1 anyway.
I feel like he's got this idea that reference involves a sort of transitive property whereby, Ready Player One referenced these 100 things. So if I reference Ready Player One, I'm hinting at all of these things as well. When I say I was remembering sitting in the chair in Ready Player One, I was also talking about that bit in Ghostbusters where...
This would be such an interesting idea for an author who had slightly different sensibility to Ernest,
slightly more
to explore.
Saying,
because by the end of the book, the logical conclusion would just be the chapters would just be the word of Wade, all in capitals being screamed into the sun.
Wade, just this big siren.
Because really, the referent is becoming less and less relevant. It's just the act of referencing that is propping up the narrative. Anyway, I'm sure that's something we could develop into a slightly less bullshit theory. Here is a sentence that stood out to me because it felt like he was gaslighting me into pretending that the chapters we've already read and now documented reading were about something that they weren't. Because it had this kind of oh, goodness me, at long last, I hoped the familiar setting that he's now in would help me make a breakthrough in my quest for the 7 shards. So far, it hadn't worked. It hadn't worked because you haven't
thought
tried.
about it for 4 years or
twice.
however long it's been since the book started.
It's crazy. But
That
he
was
just
like
drops it in.
the first 10 minutes of him being like of this book
Instantly
starting.
fell off.
That it was referenced and then gone. Hasn't someone already found one?
I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure that someone's already like cracked one.
yeah.
But it didn't mention what toll he had to pay.
Maybe that's the whole thing, is like he doesn't know yet. Makes it even worse, because then it's like, when will he realise? He looks down and he's missing an arm.
Oh, fuck.
If I'd been... Okay, this is a fun one. If I'd been a normal Oasis user, basically he's talking about how he arrives in his home base to try and crack the shard riddle that he can't stop thinking about, even though it's been 100 years.
Can't stop thinking about right now.
And then he's like, oh, you know what? Let me go to the planet Gregarious in Sector 1, which is the home of the company. It's like the virtual home of the company. And he says, if I'd been a normal Oasis user, this trip would have cost me some serious coin. But since I wore the robes of Anorak,
He likes to mention those.
I could teleport anywhere at any time for free. It was a far cry from the days when I was a broke school kid stranded on Ludus, which is the very dumb name for the like learning planet where you go to school. Now, a couple of things. It's interesting that he remembers. He's got the kind of self-awareness to remember that it sucked when it cost him so much to travel anywhere that he almost wasn't able to win the competition.
Hang on a minute, because I can see where you're going with this, and it's going to be a sort of criticism of him, saying that he's not made it any easier for people
He's made
in
it
that
harder.
situation. Now,
Because he's made people increasingly more reliant on the technology.
Listen, he was going to get round to that, but this
it's
shard
it's
riddle's
Alexander
come up.
Hamilton rules.
Yeah,
If only he'd lived, he would
long
have
enough to
solved
stop slavery. Like, yeah, he's gonna get around as soon as he's filled that rocket with cum, and
Is that chapter 6?
and he's solved the shard riddles. As soon as he's
top
like
of his
he's
list.
back, like getting his leg over again, he's gonna make it like free to travel or something. I'm sure.
Fair enough. I just remembered as well a fun detail, which is that the thing I said about how he almost can't participate in the gunting of Ready Player One, a word which does seem to have kind of been dropped in Ready Player Two. It's come up once or twice.
Yeah.
Maybe he said it out loud for the first time and was like sick in his mouth.
Maybe now they're going to be called shunters.
Oh, here's hoping not. The only reason that the coin issue ceased to be an issue was, I believe, that the first Easter egg was on that planet. Like, it was another case of like, if only it were... Oh, it is exactly where I am. And he just
If only it
trips
were in
over
my
3
house.
eggs. Wow, what are the odds?
One thing I'd like to mention as well is that I listened to the last like 10 minutes of the previous episode just so that I had something for the recap.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be listening to the whole thing.
No.
Because I can't hear about this for more months. But interestingly, when he's on his super killing spree of all his haters, he mentions then that the only reason he's able to do it is he can teleport anywhere he wants because he wears the robes of Anorak, and it makes him invisible and invincible. And so I just want to make it clear that although for us and for the listeners it's been 2 weeks since we heard about the robes of Anorak, it's been 4 pages since he explicitly mentioned that it's the robes of Anorak.
Now here's a question, intentional or otherwise. Now our generous reading principle that we like to employ would say that this is perhaps Ernest hinting that the robes of Anorak are going to be super plot centric. They're going to be very important, and we need to really understand and appreciate the good robes.
I'm wearing wink. Wade winked at the reader. The robes of Anorak.
Size 50 font on the next page. Last point that I thought about, and I don't actually...
For the chapter, are we done?
No, super not. This isn't necessarily a criticism, but is it not quite boring to make people pay to travel this infinite world that you're trapping them in? Like, would it not be just more fun by every metric not to monetize travel? I'm not convinced that from like even a business perspective. I mean, sure, you probably make a bit more money, but maybe people are being disincentivized to like spend time there because they're like, well, I can only be on planet dull shit. I can't travel to any of the good planets because I have to pay real world money. It just seems like it's a weird not comment on microtransactions, considering Ernest is like a pro gamer. I'm sure it's weird for him to like mention this uncritically and just be like, well, of course you had to pay to travel everywhere.
It just makes no sense. It's not real travel.
You're not
going anywhere. But it's just going. It's like paying to go from Facebook to Google.com.
Don't give him any ideas.
Whoops. Oh no.
So basically, he teleports there. Did I mention he did it for free with the robes of Anorak?
Whose robes?
They're basically these cool Anaraki robes.
Okay.
Now, don't
Like
go thinking
just
an
a
Anorak
coat.
is a coat of robes.
Yeah.
No, Anorak's
robe
a
of
wizard.
coat is amazing idea.
He meets there their head of operations, a man called Faisal Sodi, I'm going to say.
Okay.
And Faisal, he seems like he's a very friendly guy. I won't go so far as to say that he's got a personality yet.
Okay.
But maybe that's waiting to be developed.
And now he couldn't go and see him in the real world.
Yeah. Well, he could. But
Okay.
I think the reason that they don't, and this is a fair reason, it's basically just like telecommuting, because they're about to have their co-owners meeting. You remember the very real
Of course,
name
yeah.
that is, where all of the three, Wade, the four co-owners, because one of them died in the last one, I remember.
Oh, no.
They have to meet up and just have an argument. Every
Yeah,
few
that's
months.
good, yeah.
But yeah, they do
how
it
you keep the
in the
tension
virtual space. I think also they mentioned that there was a reason. They say here, we held our co-owners meetings here instead of in a standard Oasis chat room because it allowed all sorts of additional security measures. That's a fun thing to make.
Okay.
It's like having a premium Zoom account, I guess.
Yeah.
Without the sensation, so they shake hands in the virtual world. Now you probably think that's wacky and off the wall, but think about it. Without the sensation of skin-to-skin human contact that existed before the Oni headset, the ancient gesture, shaking hands, had lost all of its meaning. After we'd introduced the Oni, shaking hands had come back in vogue, along with high fives and fist bumps, because now they felt real. I highlighted that because I don't really think that shaking hands as a concept would just fall off and just be no longer in vogue.
No.
I think it's kind of meaningless to say that it would have fallen out of vogue in the amount of time that has elapsed between virtual reality and then the Oni being developed.
Like, people use a thumbs up emoji. You don't have to do the physical thing, but it still has meaning.
Yeah, there's a kind of heritage, I suppose, to shaking hands that I think it's probably a bit arrogant to say that we brought shaking hands back into fashion.
Also, like, we've had 18 months of not really shaking people's hands and hugging people, and
I forgot how to do it.
Whilst I've been out and about, whilst I have seen people doing these things, it's not like people, as soon as they get like a drink brought to the table, and now everyone does a little shake of hands because it's just now it feels real.
I love that skin on skin.
Yeah, it just brings it all back.
Two of the others arrive. Now you'll remember that the owners are these. We've got H, who's turned out, it was Wade's best bud in Ready Player One, who he thought was a white male fighting champion, turned out to be a black female fighting champion.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the person whose wedding he's practicing Bollywood dancing for?
Because she's marrying she's marrying a Bollywood singer.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why Wade thinks that he needs to be an expert at this dance.
Well,
he
because
said
he thinks it's going to get him laid. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we've got Shoto, who was he was like a baby in the first one, basically. I think I was quite confused because he's now an adult, and you'll see in a moment he's definitely an adult, but I'm super sure he was like 10 in the original. And then they're waiting. The elephant in the room, or rather not yet in the virtual room, is Artemis.
Will she be coming along?
We'll remember, of course, that they fucked. They made the beast with two backs.
You cannot get away from that.
But then they super stopped doing that because of Wade being a kind of techno-fascist.
Yeah.
And she wants to not do that so much.
Yeah, at the very least is a sort of lib.
Yeah. One sort of lens to consider this chapter through is, who does Ernest want us to like? And I think that's an occasionally facile thing to think, because obviously you don't need to have a likeable character in a book.
Well, you
for it to
don't,
be
but
good.
he probably does think that you do.
Yeah, and I think he wants us to... Well, I'm sort of in two minds. I think ultimately he always wants us to think that Wade Owen Watts, is a great guy, like a cool, great guy, an aspirational character, ultimately. However, in previous chapters, we kind of got a hint that maybe he was trying to push us towards Artemis's viewpoint that, we shouldn't give up on the world and just leave because you happen to be rich. Especially when you're accentuating the problem by locking everyone into this virtual world to escape reality rather than fix it. Like, that seemed Maybe it's just me, but it seemed like she was making the better argument there.
Yeah, I mean, but
It didn't matter because they immediately voted the other way.
You're kind of like super woke though.
True.
And so maybe
I'm a
maybe
snowflake.
that's the sort of lens, exactly, that you're looking through rather than Ernie's lens, which has sort of been uncritically in favour of Wade so far. But it could be changing.
It could be changing. So in this chapter, I've sort of read it as neither Wade nor Artemis really come off in a way that imply we should be agreeing with either of them, but I'd be curious to know where you land. So they arrive in the zone, in the meeting. H and Shoto are there. Miss Cook, that's Samantha, Artemis, she's running a bit late. She doesn't want to be there, basically. She's leaving it to the last minute every time.
Do you think Ernest's idea of characterization is the more names a character has, the more character they are?
For sure. I mean, that's multifariousness. It made flesh.
She's layered.
H liked to stay up late and sleep in even later, I highlighted, just because it doesn't really make any sense. They meet up. He's reflecting in a quite depressing way on how he doesn't really see these people anymore, and he feels like they've got more of a life than he has. H is getting married. She's got this beautiful, famous Bollywood wife, and is also like a super celebrity, and without any of the like PR hassles that Wade has had. By hand, I mean brought entirely on himself.
No one's doing hate singles all about.
None have come out. And the same is true for Shoto, who has become some kind of like game developer within the Oni. He like makes experiences that you can get involved with. They're all just loving life, and he has this sad bit of reflecting about how like it's always him having to make plans, and like he feels like he's becoming more and more of a burden.
He's a walking like Onion article about sad man.
It is really quite upsetting. I still couldn't fathom... Oh, there's this bit here. Artie's running late, H said. She's supposed to be logging in from Liberia, I think. Yeah, I said, rolling my eyes. That's the most recent stop on her ongoing tour of the world's most depressing places.
Wow!
I still couldn't fathom why Samantha felt the need to endure all of the hassles of real-world travel when she could have visited safely via telepresence robot, or experienced any location in the world by downloading a .oni clip recorded there.
Yeah, she just wanted to look around. Like, she could have just got on Google Street View, Liberia.
Part of like the reason she's going is to raise awareness for people's like terrible
to
living
do
conditions.
A big hate campaign against him.
Yeah, I mean it's quite self-evident why that wouldn't work. He laments this in further detail by explaining that if she wanted to, they basically have like a super Google Earth where you can just go anywhere. It's called Earth or E-Earth, but it's just capital E Earth, which stands for Ersatz Earth, which I think is very funny. And it's constantly being updated with data taken from live satellite imagery, drone footage, traffic, security, and smartphone cameras to make it as accurate as possible.
Oh, good.
Just throw that out uncritically.
Yeah,
that's probably fine.
Just all your civil liberties are gone.
Never mind. Samantha felt it was imperative for her to witness the true state of the world with her own two eyes, even when it came to the most dangerous war-torn countries. In other words, she was crazy.
Yeah, in Wade's view, that would be crazy, because Wade puts on, like, AR goggles to go for a swim.
to walk around his own house, because he can't bear to see
He doesn't want to see anything with his real eyes.
Yeah, that's true. Now, Wade... I don't think it would be fair to say has been a complicated character so far. He's had one thing that he wants to do.
And that's dimension. He's had one dimension.
Yeah, and he's done it without resistance throughout.
Yeah.
But here, Ernest takes a whole new kind of look at Wade. He even uses something that I haven't seen a lot of in the text, which is italics. No, she's selfless and principled, replied a nagging little voice in my head. And you're neither of those things. Is it any wonder she dumped you? I clenched my teeth. These co-owners meetings were always bad for my self-esteem. So, is this part of that evolution that I alluded to, and which I think we may be considering the theme here? Maybe evolution, Ersatz evolution. In the sense that Ernest is now, he's problematizing Wade, who has so far been one of the least complicated heroes in literary fiction. When he's wanted to do something, it's happened.
Unquestionable, simply because he doesn't raise any questions.
Yeah, and even if he did raise a question, it was actually already answered.
The answer was to his left.
Just next
the answer was in
door.
his pocket.
He lives his life constantly like Harry looking in the Erised mirror,
Like
just finding everything.
He's just constantly downing Felix Felicis. Just like, whoops.
It's very handy. After the contest ended, Helen, this is H, legally changed her name to H with no surname, just like Sting and Madonna. And since her true identity, appearance and gender were now public knowledge in the wake of Halliday's contest, she'd promptly ditched the world-famous white male avatar she'd used to mask her true identity since childhood. Like Samantha and Shoto and many other real-world celebs, H now used an Oasis Ravatar, an avatar that recreated her unaltered real-world appearance and was updated each and every time she logged into the simulation.
This is funny because, like, it does make a statement, but it also has the same energy as, like, kid who comes in on non-school uniform day in his uniform. Like, I'm just coming as me. Like,
I love the word
I've got
avatar.
no robes of... It's terrible.
It's really good. I mean, it doesn't even stand for anything.
Raw avatar.
He could have been like real avatar, but he doesn't
Yeah.
ever bother to sort of explain that one, which is unusual. I
Yeah,
think,
normally
for Ernest.
he'd be champing at the old bit to
Yeah.
explain some new jargon.
H is still a total badass, in case you're worrying.
That's
She's
good.
absolutely dominant at every one of the like PvP games that she still has time to play. And although they're hanging out less and less, he doesn't resent them too much. I think Wade really is starting to wonder, like, why is it that my life is increasingly worse while everyone's is increasingly better? And I think he kind of starts to see himself at the core of that as the common denominator in all of these problems. It's him. It's Wade Owen Watts. It's Wow himself.
No.
Shoto, who he sees even less frequently than H, has had a real change in life. And although I won't doubt that, you know, maybe this is actually, now that I think about it, why we've had these time skips. Because he's now an adult. And he turned 18 a year ago at the point of Chapter 5, which I can't tell when that is. You'd have to have one
Fine,
of those
if you want.
red string timelines
Yeah.
to track how many time jumps there have been already. And to celebrate, he also adopts his avatar's name. He gets married to a woman called Kiki, relocates to a Japanese castle, and then announces that he's having a baby, all in the space of like
Wow.
no time at all. Now,
Good on him.
yeah, I thought so. I thought that's an interesting thing to mention. I wonder why he has, and here's why he did. It was still hard to believe that Shoto would be a father in a few months at such a young age. I was concerned for him, though I had no idea why. It wasn't like he wouldn't be able to afford to send little Daito, named after his dead brother, who was killed by the baddies in the last book,
Oh, no.
to a good
What a
school.
tribute.
I just didn't understand why he was in such a big hurry until he sat me down and explained it to me. Japan was in the midst of an underpopulation crisis, because so many of its citizens had opted to stop having children over the past 3 decades. As the country's wealthiest and most famous young couple, he and Kiki felt obligated to lead by example and reproduce as quick as possible.
Just start banging.
non-stop.
Just start banging.
I like this idea. I think, you know, I'm not criticising its inclusion, because that is a thing, right? Like, there are reports of Japanese birth rates declining. I think it's a slightly odd angle to take for this character's development.
Just randomly
Because so
decide.
far he has had no character. Like, fair enough, he was quite young in the first one.
Yeah.
He was just like liked video games was really his whole character. Got sad when his brother died. But now that the first thing we know about him is he fucks as often as possible to impregnate
To save
his,
the nation
his
of Japan.
world-beating wife. Then it's just like, I don't know, it's just not where I expected really any character to go. After little Daito arrived, they planned to start working on a little Shoto, or perhaps a little Kiki. So that's good for him, I guess. He fucks.
Yeah, well, good on him. Someone should be.
In the
Wade
fuckometer,
isn't.
yeah, it's karmic balance. We rarely talked about Shoto's late brother Daito, or his murder, so much so that I'd forgotten that happened entirely.
I didn't even know this person
Yeah,
existed.
I can't really remember the circumstances of his death, but I do seem to recall that it's like quite glossed over, and you know, like, clearly wasn't particularly traumatic for Wade because he hasn't mentioned it.
No.
Like, he hasn't mentioned it
hasn't
once
mentioned it,
so
no.
far. But the last time we had, Shoto told me he was still in mourning for him and that he feared he always would be. I understood what he meant because I felt the same way about my Aunt Alice, who was crushed.
So
in
she got a
stacks.
big stack pushed
And
on
my
her,
old
didn't she? Yeah.
downstairs neighbour, Mrs. Gilmore.
Who was in the stack that got pushed on?
I think so.
Oh, cool.
Both of them have been murdered too by the same man, Nolan Sorrento, great name, the former head of operations at Innovative Online Industries. Basically, it transpires that this man was... They pinned the whole thing on this one man who was like, I think, what did I just say? He was the head of operations.
Yeah.
He was convicted of 37 counts of homicide, and he's currently serving time on death row in Ohio. He specifies...
It's cool that, like, some things are just exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like, some things... Sometimes it's like, yeah, my AI, like, handyman who has to remain silent at my beck and call told me to, you know, that he'd cleaned out the spider coffin tank that I sleep in. And then sometimes it's like, yeah, he was awaiting the chair on death row in Ohio.
In specifically, like, I don't know how to pronounce it, Chillicothe, Ohio, about
Sure.
50 miles south of Columbus. Weirdly overspecified, right? Prediction, he's going to break out.
Yeah.
Surely. Now, there's a very sort of odd diversion here where he just lists, like, how the legal history of the company worked, which is that they tried to pin it on him, seemed to work, but then there was something about how, in order to escape from IOI, the evil company in the first one, he had to pretend to, like, work for them.
Who?
And so Wade. And so IOI then claimed that he was their legal property. Wade was their legal property, and so the Oasis was theirs. And rather than... I was like, oh, that's, like, quite an intriguing... I mean, it's nonsense, but it's an intriguing angle.
Yeah.
Hand-waved immediately away when he says they just bought IOI and fired everyone that was involved in that. And so it didn't matter. So they just never resolved that.
I love me some Jeopardy.
Now the Sixers were a distant memory. That was what they were called, the bad guys.
Oh, yeah, because he was a Sixer for Leighton Punk in the song.
Yeah. And Innovative Online Industries was just another wholly owned subsidiary of Gregarious Simulation Systems. GSS was far and away the largest corp in the world, and if we kept growing at our current rate, before too long we might be the only one. Just presented as cool. That was the reason a lot of our own users had started to refer to GSS as the new Sixers, and me, H, Shoto and Samantha as the 4 nerds of the apocalypse. This bit is amazing. Now this bit, it follows directly on, but I just want to pause to enjoy the previous bit first of all. Highlights include just being like, we're going to be the only company in the world now, lol.
Sure.
Very cool.
Yep.
Also just kind of glossing over the fact that everyone is increasingly saying that they are the harbingers of the apocalypse. That's probably very fine.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any opinions about anything, Wade. Like, he never says any... He just says stuff. He never, like, says anything that is a kind of value judgment.
No, well, you
about
remember
those
that he
things.
doesn't like the political news.
Maybe that's why, because he's
Yeah.
just giving us the facts.
Yeah.
He's not diving into the analysis.
No,
the editorial.
he's not here to cast judgment. He's just
not here to tell a story.
He's here to tell it how it is.
Yeah, in a purely factual, dry basis.
Descriptive.
Now, I highlighted this part, and one feature... Have you used a Kindle? One feature that Kindles have is that they will show you, if you want...
Which bits people have
everyone has
highlighted.
So this is, so far, the most highlighted bit of the whole book.
Right.
And that's funny because... why would you highlight something in a book? Like, you mark books, don't you?
Every now and
Sometimes
then.
Some marginalia.
Yeah.
Some page foldings.
Every now and then it's because there's a part that I find particularly interesting that I'd like to be able to, like, find easily, a passage I enjoy, something I think is maybe broadly more applicable, might be relevant to something I write or think later.
And for me as well, like, I would be highlighting something if I thought it was, like, a unique insight to that text. Right, like if it was just water is wet, then I wouldn't be highlighting that because I could probably find that out.
That's
by
probably
dunking my
that
head in
information
a
is probably
tap.
available elsewhere.
Curious then that this part is just from a different book. Two-Face was right. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain, and that is the most highlighted part of the book so far.
That's because people are just like,
like
reference.
But I mean, that is quite a damning indictment of, like, everything that we're saying, because I think we've been kind of on the same page about criticising the fact that you can't just reference and that's a story. Turns out you can.
You can,
and people will say it's the best part and highlight it.
As a linked thing, there was a tweet doing the rounds this week of someone who had clearly themselves written some marginalia and then was pretending that they'd found it in a charity shop book, and it was in the margins of a, like, Bukowski, and they'd just, like, bracketed a certain bit and written "Go to therapy, dummy." So then there was a sort of like slew of imitation posts where people were just like doing bullshit ones. Like there was a guy who was like, "Wow, found this in my copy of 1984," and he was just pointing to something that Big Brother had like said, saying like Orwellian, like eyes. But then in their own replies they had another one and going, "Wow, gonna have to agree to disagree with his note here from Lolita," and it was just a note in the margin that said, "Yes, Humbert, go off, King."
God, these problematic marginalia. Let's use this opportunity to sidestep into some marginalia of our own, which is your interim bonus content.
Here we go. So,
it's bonus content. Yeah.
now the interview that I did last week came about because I was trying to find some of Ernest Cline's writing tips.
Yeah.
But I hadn't been able to find any explicit, like no like list or Medium post or anything like that.
That's pretty humble of him.
That is. Or maybe he doesn't want to give the game away, does he?
That's true.
Keep it sewn up for himself. But someone that I remembered who has had no such qualms about throwing their bullshit out into the ether of the web is a man who we've discussed before on That's a Shame, our other podcast that comes out on alternate weekends to this one. You guys
Shame.City, have a look.
Yeah. A guy we've discussed, a guy we detest, and a guy that we pretty much presume is the same guy as Ernest.
They are like the same category of guy, right? They're cut from the same cloth.
Is the internet's Chuck Wendig. Now, I don't call him that. He calls himself that, the internet's
does he?
Chuck Wendig. Yeah.
That's nice of him to offer himself up to the collective ownership and love of the public.
It absolutely is.
The online public.
And this is an article from about 4 years ago from his website terribleminds.com. That's a very good list of vital writing advice. Do not ignore.
By the way, who is he? Like, why should we listen to his writing advice?
Thank you for asking. He's a loser. He's a famous loser. He's a published loser. Yeah, he's a published author. He writes trash.
He writes some great tweets if you'd like to go and follow
He
them.
Doesn't do that.
Him and Lim and off and trade good morning, good night.
Stop.
Cock womble.
No, it's okay. No, there's no need.
Waffle,
there's enough of that coming up.
Idiom.
I thought you might like to enjoy the picture that he's put with this.
Oh, you did think wrong.
Yeah,
never
but
mind.
okay, then maybe you'll like the caption for the picture, which is "Back off, man! I'm a word scientist."
Oh, that is fun.
Now, this is a depressingly long post on his page, so I think this is content that we can dip in and out of across the fortnight. But here we go. I thought I'd read some for us, and we'll go through some of his tips. Hello, America. I am the internet's Chuck Wendig. And contrary to what I usually do on this here website, I'm going to offer some vital writing advice. So that's good because he's doing that thing where he's like, this here website,
it's jovial. It's vernacular.
It's conversational.
It's like when a good brand talks like they're one of us.
Yeah, I love it when brands do that.
I fucking love that a lot, actually. It's whimsical.
But then also, he goes on there to do some real comedy. Internet's Chuck Wendig, people plead. Please tell us the secret that will turn us into super mega ultra rock star writers like yourself. It's true that I am a super mega rock star writer, though I have not yet earned the ultra adjective yet because I have not yet fought and killed the chaos leopard and taken its sapphire eyes as a trophy.
He's so random.
One day, and then in between asterisks.
Holds up Spork.
Better than that. A distant leopard's growl fills the sky.
I mean, that's worse. That's worse than Holds Up Spork. He is, if I could summarise him, like at the moment, the way that I conceive of this type of guy, of which there's a worrying propensity online for people like this. Lots of the kind of FBP crowd fall into this category.
They love it.
Sports ball. People who talk about sports ball and the superb owl. Things like that. It's people who are into that. People who say things like fuck nugget. It's that category of person. We need to think of a name for them. Maybe Wendigos.
Libs.
Libs.
Libs. That's what they are. So he goes off and he's going to do some tips.
Yeah. Now that we've set the scene.
Number 1 is finish what you start. That's a good piece of advice.
Good tip. I'm with
a
you.
story is not a story without an ending, and so you must practice to that point. Plus, finishing a thing makes you feel good. It gives you momentum. That's a good tip. Well done, Chuck. Couldn't
Couldn't
not
disagree.
disagree.
Thanks, Chuck. Next time on Chuck's Tip.
Part 2. Now, this is where we start to see a little glimpse into the world of Chuck and indeed of Ernie Klein. Right, number 2 is write who you are.
Okay.
We worry so much about originality in stories.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you, no story is original. What is original is the arrangement of the story, and that arrangement comes from you. Do not run away from your authorial intent, run toward it.
Sure.
Now, there's parts of that I think are good.
Yeah, I think that's broadly fine.
And then there's also parts of that I think is exactly why we have people like Ernie. It's like, well, who am I? I am a guy who genuinely believes and will openly say that referencing something is a huge
books.
Emotional connection, and indeed is books.
Yeah. Although it could be the case that, the way that Chuck's advice functions in the real world is that, like, Ernest will always write books like this, and it's fine. If he's going to write a book, it will be like
May
this.
as well be that book.
Yeah. So I guess as a cry for people to just make stuff, it's not unfounded.
Point 3, also run screaming past your self-doubt. Your self-doubt is a jerk. It'll jog alongside you, trying to convince you to just stop and lay down and give up.
Nice.
You can't give up. Keep running. Run faster than your self-doubt. Steal a car. Steal an actual car.
What?
Drive fast past it. Then reverse and back over it. Hear the crunch of its bones. That's what it gets for sassing you. That's good.
It is funny when people say things for too long, I think.
That is good. When they do a sort of, when they Family Guy their own writing.
Yeah.
No, that's power. You said that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank God.
No. You know me, I'm a Wendigo to the core.
Write what you know.
Yeah, that's the same as point 2, I'd say.
Oh, well, maybe not.
Write who you are, write what you know.
And what you don't know, you can always learn.
Oh, that's write everything.
And what you can't learn, you can always steal from other authors by hitting them with rocks and opening their heads like coconuts. Each writer's brain is like a fruit containing many seeds, the seeds of knowledge. Kill authors and eat their brains.
It's quirky. That's the thing. It's got this...
It's kooky.
I'm trying to remember what it reminds me of.
It's, can I say, it's zany.
Yeah, there is a zany... Can I one-up you?
Go on.
It's irreverent.
Oh! Yes. That's where the shots are fired.
It's the fucking Netflix irreverent
Yes,
category.
it is.
This whole thing of, like, the need to be quirky with these, like, short sentence things where it's like, the idea is just slightly... It's like, oh, we know everyone expects you to say this, so I'm going to say that. But then add this bit about zombies or something. Like, I hate it, first of all.
Yes, it's fucking
I need to do some
abhorrent.
thinking about where it comes from. I'm thinking of, like, the Innocent brand of smoothies. They do a lot of writing in this style.
Yeah, there's that. I think it feels very Tumblr-esque to me, which could be unfair.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay,
There's
cool,
almost
that's
nothing
good.
you can say about Tumblr which is unfair in my experience.
Point 5. Now, this is an interesting one. Don't use adverbs.
Yeah? That's quite cool. Stephen King says that.
Adverbs are witches' traps. It's interesting because he does go on to use a fair few adverbs in here.
I bet one of his... I'm going to put money on the fact that one of his pieces of advice, even if it's not in this article, somewhere will be like, don't listen to me, do your own thing, disregard all of the previous advice, just be yourself. Just imagine your brain's like a little coconut that you're cracking open with the tree of knowledge.
I think the one we'll end on here, point 6, just because I think it's really good.
Yeah.
I think this is good. It's WWFD.
What would Freud do?
Close. Ask, what would Jonathan Franzen do?
Oh, right.
And then listen to the answer. That's Franzen speaking to you from his cosmic prison. He wants to be free, but you mustn't let him be. Squeeze your eyes shut and command him to leave this plane, reminding him that he has no power here. In the wake of his absence, you will feel cleansed and ready to write.
He's super, like, not understood the assignment that he set himself in this writing advice. I would argue that none of that is bad writing advice. I've heard a lot worse, a lot more, like, egregious. It's also not novel writing advice by any means.
No.
When we did our deep dive into him, I think we found that once you get past this initial layer, and maybe we'll experience this on Big Bad Books if we continue with this, once you peel back the initial layer of the onion of Chuck Wendig's advice, which is all just quite bland truisms about the craft, it all became like tinged with a growing pulsating sexual frustration that like showed through all of the examples. They stopped being about things like steal a car and they became things like fuck your way to the top of the bestseller list. Like it definitely.
Yeah.
I'm not just misremembering that, right?
No, you're
it definitely
not.
had that vibe.
Yeah. It was like truly deranged
Yeah.
pervert stuff. Russ in Cheshire. Style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so true.
Yeah.
He's so archetypal at this. Well, there we go. Thank you for that.
That's okay. You're very, very
Let's
welcome.
dive back in this very organic
Straight
way
back.
with
I was
no
sorry to
jingles.
leave it.
Artemis arrives. She storms in. She's late, but not super late. Her avatar looked the same as it always had, with one minor change. After the contest, she'd added the reddish-purple birthmark that covered the left half of her real face to her avatar's face as well. So now there was no discernible difference between her Avi's appearance and her appearance in real life. What do you think about that? Empowering.
It is empowering because she need not be afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, Wade was never bothered by that.
No, I mean, he went to some length to describe how it looked and how, you might be really bothered by, that. But then he stressed he was not personally.
No, he wasn't. And
that he was
you
pointing it
shouldn't-
out just so you
shouldn't
also
be.
won't.
You
Yeah.
shouldn't be either.
He was celebrating difference by holding up a huge microscope to it until it was all you could think about. Which is an interesting approach for sure. Now, I wonder, you could probably critique this through the lens of the empowerment seems to have come about from one of two ways. Either Wade's sort of meagre acceptance of her when they fuck and lose their virginities to each other. Is it that makes her think, I can be happy about how I look now that Wade has validated me, in which case that sucks? Or is it, now that I'm super rich, I can look how I like? Like, either way, I don't think... Although I like the idea that if you have a character who struggles with their appearance, at some point they stop struggling with their appearance and come to terms with it. I'm not convinced by the character development that anything kind of warranted that.
No, there are reasons that you could write for this that would be like genuine.
And maybe one of them happened, but we didn't hear about it.
No, we didn't hear about that. No,
so it
could be that possibly it was the fight with Wade actually that led
I like
to
that. I like that
that
idea.
it was having had that disagreement that she realised that she had for too long been basing those opinions of like self-doubt on
through
the opinions of others,
the male
specifically
gaze,
men,
the Wade
and
gaze.
that now she need not do that.
Yeah.
But interestingly, I would like to say I don't think it is that.
Well, crucially, it isn't because it's not in the book. So, I mean, we can headcanon it all we like.
Yeah.
And I liked it. It's certainly better than the void that currently exists. I glanced up at the name tag. Here's the one foray into dull tech detail. Maybe there were more, but I've become so...
You don't
inured
have to read
them.
it if you...
I will.
Oh, okay.
That I didn't notice if there were others. I glanced up at the name tag floating above her avatar's head. Wild that they're just always there. It had a thin rectangular border around it, which indicated that the avatar's operator was not using an Oni headset to experience the Oasis. We'd added this feature due to overwhelming customer demand. Oasis users with this name tag border were now known as TICs, capital T, brackets, a truncation of the word haptics. Most TICs were people who had already used up their hours of... They get 12 hours in the Oni before they go nuts. And so it seems to be... It's unclear to me why there was an overwhelming customer demand to know about this.
There wasn't.
It seems like it's either just a surveillance thing or it's to kind of work out who's too poor to afford.
There definitely wasn't a reason for it. What's happened there is he wanted to mention that. So he wanted to mention that she wasn't coming in the Oni, right? So he had to think of a way in which you could tell. Easiest way is something like that.
Okay.
But then Ernest is trapped then because he's misunderstood his own readers.
Ernest's
Because
dilemma, we call this.
Yeah, Ernest's wager. He thinks that if he mentions that, he's got to give the reason why. It couldn't just be that this is a feature.
No.
It couldn't just be that that's a feature. There
You've
has to be
got to
a
know
reason
about
for the
it a
feature.
bit.
So, but he's simultaneously over and underestimated his readers in that he's overestimated them in terms of assuming that they'd be like, well, hang on a minute, why is this a convenient feature suddenly here? They definitely wouldn't. But then underestimated them by doing one that obviously isn't real, which is public demand for this bullshit feature.
That is a shame. I'm going to skim through a section that has quite worrying implications, which basically reveals that when they're upgrading all their storage. The main reason for this meeting is that they're just announcing a firmware update and they've got a new data facility and so they can have an argument. But the actual in-world reason is very loose. But it says that the reason for the data storage needs being ever increasing is due to the enormous UBS brackets user brain scan files that were stored in every Oni user's account, which are updated every time they log in or out of the Oasis. So they're taking a scan of your whole brain and just storing that indefinitely.
That probably helps out with the Ersatz Earth.
Yeah, it probably would. Compounding this problem was the fact that we didn't purge any Oasis users' account data when they died in the real world, including those huge UBS files. Faisal explained to me that this was because we own all of that data, and it was extremely valuable to the company for several reasons, including shit like user marketing trend analysis. But the main reason we held on to those Oni user brain scans was because that data helped our neural interface engineers improve the operability of the Oni headset.
It was actually for everyone's benefit.
That was why they worked so well, because we had a huge pool of willing guinea pigs, there's that beautiful phrase again, who didn't mind giving us complete access to the contents of their skull, so long as we gave them access to our high-quality, sensory immersive bread and circus simulator.
They absolutely had to do this.
There's two things going on. He's at first trying to sort of show that he's really not interested in why they store this, but then he's also very dismissive and disparaging of them, like these fucking plebs giving us their brains for free.
Who want to just so they can come on this silly little website we've got
that runs the whole planet, and that I said without which civilization itself would crumble.
That I have a huge red button, can end at any moment, and couldn't live without myself.
Terrible. They announced that, there's this firmware update that is the cause of part of the meeting. And the reason for this is stability, like a Nintendo Switch update, specifically with regards to what they call overclocking, which is when you hack one of your Onis so that you can spend more than 12 hours on them. Despite our safety warnings, there were always a few users who chose to ignore them. Some people were convinced that they were special. Their brains could handle 14 or even 16 hours of consecutive Oni usage.
These are the Oni users who are the equivalent of people who don't put the Nintendo Wii wrist straps on.
Just lob it straight through a TV, through a baby's skull. But when they pushed their luck too far, they ended up lobotomizing themselves. And that was very bad for business.
That is bad.
His only sort of reflection on that. Don't worry, though. You looked kind of concerned for Wade's safety, I detected.
Well, yeah, he's...
Thanks to our ironclad end-user license agreement, GSS couldn't be held legally responsible for any of these deaths. But we still wanted to protect the overclockers from themselves, so we updated the firmware whenever a new exploit was discovered. He mentions briefly that there's this rumour, and again, I've sort of lost interest in my initial idea of trying to track when something might be a plot thread.
Right,
but this has big plot thread energy, which is that there's an urban legend that Halliday himself died, he got cancer as a result of spending too much time in the Oni-verse testing.
Right, okay.
He says it was complete bullshit, though, which seems to kind of wave it away, but also,
it's there. It's there in case we want to use it later.
Now, Artemis wants to raise a point, and it's related to this safety thing. She basically says that there should be an age limit, because if the Oni can literally lobotomize you, as he said, then it stands to reason that, maybe kids shouldn't be using it.
Yeah, well, and if, you don't want them stumbling on all of the, upskirt content.
That would be unfortunate.
Yeah.
She says that they should only allow Oni headsets to be used by people at 18 or older. Or in fact, actually, possibly she says that it should be raised to 25 because that's when your brain stops developing or something.
Sure.
And all three of the other people in the room are like, well, that would mean we can't use it because they're all basically children.
Babies.
Are you suggesting that we've all suffered brain damage from using the Oni? Well, she replied with a smirk. That certainly explains some of the decisions you've made over the past 3 years. Bang! You love to see it.
She's
fucking love to see it.
For him.
She explains that she doesn't care what.
How old is she?
Same age, I think.
Is she? She's not older.
No, I
she's
think
not
she's pretty much. I think she's pretty much like Wade age. Wage, indeed. She explains that they're turning the entire generation of children into Oni junkies, and Wade, who has bitten his tongue for 2 pages now. God, I don't know how he managed.
He can't stand for that.
Newsflash, I said, as soon as she stopped speaking. Life in the real world totally sucks for most people, and reality went to shit long before we started selling
You could
those
change
headsets,
that!
Artie.
You are the one person who can change that. It's not an argument.
For the first time in years, Artemis locked eyes with me. You, she said, levelling a finger at me. You don't get to call me Artie anymore. And are you seriously trying to lecture me about the state of the real world? She gestured at our surroundings. You still spend all your time hiding in here. Meanwhile, I'm out there trying to save the real world. Reality. Our reality. Doesn't matter too much to Wade. He doesn't, in fact, respond to
Oh, okay, cool.
She folded her arms and kept her eyes fixed on me. I clenched and unclenched my jaw a few times. He's got such a funny reaction, actually, to keep myself from screaming in frustration. Then I switched on my emotion-suppressing software and did one of my breathing exercises that his robot therapist taught
He's got
to
like
him.
a super version of the Calm app.
It's so funny.
Actually suppresses his emotions.
It just makes his face completely blank, I think, which is very funny. My immediate instinct...
He's like a living version of like the meme where it's the crying guy with the sort of like Wojak face over the top.
My immediate instinct was to bring up Samantha's grandmother, her father's mother.
He cannot stop doing this.
Evelyn Opal Cook was the one who raised Samantha after her parents died. Her grandmother had never shared Samantha's prejudice against the Oni, quite the opposite. And the reason that she doesn't share it is because Evelyn was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer that made her bedbound, and so she used the Oni to like experience, what it would be like to not be dying. And he was about to his credit, he doesn't, but he considers using this as an argument against the quite valid idea that he's allowing reality to rot in favour of profiting.
He was going to use this 90-year-old woman as an argument against the 25-year age limit.
It's a bold choice. But eventually he says he'd made the mistake of mentioning this grandmother before. Then she'd warned me never to mention her grandmother's name again, so I didn't. No, I didn't say anything. I did my deep breathing exercises and bit my goddamn tongue.
That's, in a way, that's growth, because earlier in the book he did say that the Oni would have stopped her parents having flu.
Yeah, he does think about...
Yeah.
In fact, no, someone else raises that this time, just because we might have forgotten that Samantha's probably unreasonable. But yeah, this is the kind of evolution that I'm talking about. I think the Wade of only a few chapters ago, he would have waded straight into that one if he wouldn't mind me saying so. And this is that Ursat's evolution. What about education, Shoto said when I failed to hold up my half of the argument. People can learn all sorts of valuable skills through Oni playback. How to grow food or speak a foreign language. Doctors can learn how to perform new medical procedures from the best surgeons in their field. Why should people be denied access to an important tool for learning just because of their age?
Oh yeah, all those 14-year-old surgeons.
It's just a stupid
all those
argument.
14-year-old surgeons / farmers
who can learn it in the real
/
world.
polyglots.
Also, how does it help to watch a playback to learn a foreign language compared to just listening to it or something? Yeah, it's quite silly. He describes that, she describes that there's been a kind of spiritual death that is taking place and that they're all overseeing. Only users around the world, he shoots back, are developing a whole new kind of empathy that you can't even begin to understand until you've experienced it yourself, because she's never put on one of these headsets. She mimed jerking off. Oh, please, she said, with an exaggerated roll of her eyes. Spare me your transhumanist hive mind bullshit. I'm not buying it. It's pretty cool.
Good on her.
There's a very boring bit.
Did Wade get hard when she mimed the jacking off?
Fucking, it doesn't say it, but we know it's true.
We know for sure.
H raises the point that, this increase in empathy has led to an overwhelming drop in racism and sexism and homophobia in the real world.
Do you think does he quote the Steven Pinker study where he's like, fewer people are Googling the N-word, therefore
it sounds like
the world is less racist?
Off H's argument, because Artemis shoots back the valid point that everyone's in the Oni, so there's not hate crimes going on in the real world to the same extent.
Sleep is anti-racist because when everyone's asleep, there's fewer hate crimes happening.
True. The Oni has helped drastically lower the global birth rate too, H added. We're already on our way to solving the overpopulation
Well, hang on a
problem.
minute. Shoto's having to get it off morning, noon and night just
pages ago they mentioned that, right? It's not just me, the reality of the book is deteriorating before our eyes. Yes, but at what cost, Samantha asked. A world where people don't go outside or touch each other, where everyone sleeps their lives away while reality collapses all around them? She shook her head. Sometimes I think my parents are better off, her dead flu parents. They don't have to live in this utopia we've all created. Wade flips out, he's not happy about it, and she wants to have the vote, so it's on the record that she opposed. She gets voted down 3-1 and fucks off. She's done. As soon as we were alone, Shoto turned to me. Do you think Artie's right? He asked. Are we giving up on the real world?
Oh, good to ask after the vote.
Of course not, I replied. Artemis means well, but she has absolutely no idea what she's talking about. I grinned at him. She's still stuck in the past, and we're all already living large in the future, my friend. Maybe you're right, he said, nodding. And then he just leaves.
She's living in the past. he said of someone who just attended a cyber board meeting.
Yeah. So, again, they sort of set up the problem and immediately hand wave it away.
It's gone.
He waved and vanished from the conference room, leaving me alone. I stood there motionless for a long time,
Wow.
listening to the echo of Samantha's accusations ricochet around inside my head until the noise finally faded away. End of chapter 3/5. A beautiful piece. And I think undeniably, at least in places, of a different tenor, a different quality.
Yeah, for
than
sure.
other
This could
aspects
be
of the book.
setting up something
Radical
completely
changes.
new.
And I'm excited to know where they're going. Now, one potential counter-argument to that is that I accidentally just flicked over to the next page of the next
Oh,
chapter.
no, go on.
And it starts with, "Hello, I shouted at the six-fingered man. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." So it looks like we are
We're
quickly
back to-
diving back to reference
He had
City.
one day, one bad day. He couldn't remember any of the films he'd seen. It's
beautiful stuff.
Straight back in.
Thanks for hanging out, everyone, for Big Bad Books. We'll be back in 2 weeks from now.
We
But before
absolutely
then, we've
will.
got a whole host of things you can do to get involved. We're a new show, so anything you can do to spread the word would be ideal. Really fantastic.
What are the key things that you could do if you listen to this show, and if you enjoy this show, or what would be even more noble if you don't like this show,
Fucking hate this show. If you're Ernest Klein,
is to go to shame.city/book review
yeah,
and leave us a nice, shining,
Yeah.
glowing
hot
5-star
five.
review.
Yeah.
Glowing like the two sons of. Is
Yeah,
it
Tatooine, maybe.
Yeah, is that it?
like
Cool.
it could be
We're
or
doing that.
Naboo.
Yeah,
I might be on there.
All right,
I
one
don't
of
know
them.
a huge amount.
Yeah, like in the Star Trek films.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so if you could do that, that would be fantastic.
Be huge.
Otherwise, if you just head to shame.city
All
itself,
kinds of shit there,
then
isn't
there's
there?
everything. There's links to all of our different platforms. Over at shame.city/Twitch, we're streaming, which we're potentially about to start doing
sure are.
immediately. Although not for you when
No,
you're
no,
listening.
no.
I mean, right now in our present.
Although, send us a message when you hear this,
And we
will
might
start.
just jump on. You know how you could send us a message by going to shame.city/Discord,
Really a good
where the
place.
chat is live and well. We're
Yeah.
talking about riddles. We're talking about
In
game
anagrams.
wrecks.
Yeah.
We're talking about all sorts.
Beautiful
You could
place.
head over to @BigBadBooks or @ShameCityGang on Twitter to give us a
not?
follow.
Always be reading. That's one of our big things, isn't it?
That is big.
Even if this book's put you off reading this book, don't allow it to put you off other books. I'm going to read H.G. Wells for the first time.
Are you?
Because I went to the
Oh,
War
yeah,
of the
you
Worlds
went.
immersive experience, and I thought, I didn't know that this book might be a comrade. It seems to be anti-imperialist.
Is it?
Which I didn't understand
Was this
to be the
the
case.
The Jeff Lynne?
The Jeff Wayne War of the
Jeff
Worlds
Wayne War of the
immersive
Worlds, that's the
experience.
one.
It
Yeah.
was off the wall.
So I've
unhinged.
heard, yeah.
Really strange. But yeah, I'm going to start that. So that's my life. I hope yours is good too. We'll be back in 2 weeks, minus a day, every other Sunday. We've got a That's a Shame coming out next Sunday, of course, so feel free to check that out too. Shame.city for all your kind of hub needs. Until then, I've been Isaac. You've been...
I've been Declan.
Keep on owning. It doesn't mean anything.
Unless you're gay.
Well, that's not allowed.
Don't be doing that.
Bye.